Good morning, welcome to the episode of Breakfast Analysis. Today we're going to be talking about the meta in Rainbow Six Siege. It is November 8th on the day that I'm recording this, and we just got the new video from Ubisoft about Neon Horizon? No, Neon Dawn. There we go. The Neon Dawn update is going to be coming out, and so we're going to talk about the meta changes because the developers talked a lot about, the 20-second meta, the utility dump meta that we're currently in, and they talked about how some of these changes are trying to fix that. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the meta is like right now. We're going to talk about the changes that are coming to the game and how they might affect the meta. And we're going to talk about where I think the meta is going in the future. So to start off with, right now, we're in a meta. It's got a couple different names: 20-second meta, utility dump meta, utility soak meta. I like to call it the utility dump meta, so that's what I'm going to be referring to it as. And it's essentially the meta that has formed due to the fact that defenders have a lot of utility that can only be destroyed with explosives. And they also have a lot of ways to stop explosives from destroying those bits of utility. So we're talking about Wamai, we're talking about Jaeger, we're talking about Maestro, Melusi, any operator with a deployable shield. There's a lot of resources that defenders have that the attackers need to deal with. If you're going in for a site execute and there's a Maestro camera up, it's not impossible to go for that execute, but it's very difficult. If there's a deployable shield in that site, it's going to be very difficult to take that gunfight. So the attackers are forced to address these things. They're forced to deal with these, obstacles, which they have for a while. But with the introduction of Wamai, and stacking that on Jaeger as well, it's very difficult to be able to deal with all of it. And so what we're finding is that attackers are bringing as much as they can to deal with this type of stuff. They're bringing flashbangs to deal with Wamais and ADSs. They're bringing frag grenades. They're bringing Ash and Zofia every single round so they can destroy these shields and these evil eyes once those ADSs and stuff are gone. And they're bringing as much as they can, and then even then, they're kind of having to choose sometimes what's worth destroying and what they've got to go through. What that leads to is a very defender-sided meta. It's one that, has a lot of kind of downtime at the start of rounds where there's just, we're throwing flashbangs at ADSs, we're droning out where those ADSs are, we're finding out magnets, we're making sure that everything's clear before we throw our frag grenades in, and it's left to pretty stagnant attacker lineups. You pretty much always are going to need your hard breacher and probably somebody to support the hard breacher like a Thatcher or a Maverick. You're pretty much always going to then take an Ash, a Zofia, and a Sledge. You can't really bring anybody other than Sledge because Buck doesn't have frag grenades and soft breach is so important. And Ash and Zofia combining great guns, flashbangs, which are super important in this meta, as well as just their personal utility, which can oftentimes destroy evil eyes and cameras and stuff. That's huge. So there's not a lot of variation on the attacker-sided lineups, and what we're seeing then is a pretty stagnated meta, and it's clear based on the video that the developers just released that they're trying to address this and trying to fix this. So there's 4 talking points, that going into the new meta, I'm going to discuss here today and how they might affect things. The first one is the new operator, Aruni, I believe it's pronounced. Now, Aruni's not going to be out for 3 more months, so she's not going to have an immediate impact, but she will be coming into a game that still, at the very least, has just gone through a utility dump meta. And she brings, more utility denial. That is what she's got, her gadget. I'm not going to explain it here, but it's essentially a gate that can go in doorways or windows or what have you, and it destroys projectiles. It's another thing that's going to have to... You're going to have to destroy it somehow, whether that's more flashbangs, whether that's running through it, which I guess is now an option, but with the 40 health loss, probably not what you want to use. Or I guess, it's not even destructive, it's not even shootable. So, getting an explosive past there somehow. And that's obviously not great. I will say that it's at least only one, you could destroy it with a single flashbang temporarily. But that's still more utility soak. We're actually getting to the point where, because it's only one, she might not get used that much in a utility dump meta because you've got too many other operators that are just too useful. She can waste, let's say, 3 flashbangs. Alright, fine, but when you compare that to maybe a Maestro or a Goyo or a Melusi, or of course, Wamai Jaeger. Wamai is blocking off 5 flashbangs, Jaeger's blocking off 6. And then, the other operators like camera operators and shield operators, they just bring more to the table with what they have if you can't destroy them. So, given the current operators that are on the board, I don't think she's as good of a utility soak op than what we currently have. But of course, just because Wamai is maybe not as good as Jaeger, it's the combination of the two that really gets dangerous. And so it's combining Aruni with these other operators that might really, make the game slower and more defender sided. I will say though, it's not as bad as like Wamai, right? It's not going to be as bad as what we've seen before. So I am hopeful that with some of these other changes, it's not going to push us farther down sort of the rabbit hole that we're already in. And she's got 3 months, so she's in quarantine. Maybe we'll get some changes before she actually goes live. And I will say, like, just so I'm clear, I don't think if the meta gets to a better spot before she's released, she's probably not in a problematic state. She's not inherently, I think, an issue, but combined with the current meta we're in right now, if she came in, she might be an issue. Next thing we're going to talk about is Echo. Echo's, his intel's a little bit worse now. Obviously, his drone no longer goes invisible. Okay, great. You're watching the video where they're explaining this, and you're like, okay, great. Echo is more balanced. And then right at the end, they tack on, and his deployable shield's back. Okay, well, yeah, that sucks. More deployable shields on defense is not good. Deployable shields are extremely powerful, again, in the utility dump meta. So if Echo can bring one, that's just going to increase his pick rate. Now, I don't really know how useful his drone's going to be now that it's visible, right? It should be fairly easy to deal with in most cases. However, still having to like look up as an attacker and shoot that thing can distract you for a little bit of time. I'll be interested to see if Echo gets much use. Don't like that he's got his deployable shield back. We need fewer deployable shields in the game, not more. But, if that's the price we have to pay for visible drones, I think it'll be worth it. I think it's possible that the drones just suck now. Like, it's possible that his primary utility is just so bad that it's like, it doesn't even matter if he has a shield. We'll just see other shield operators be brought instead. So Echo, I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal. The next one I want to talk about is Zero. Obviously, no changes coming to Sam Fisher, but he is being allowed into the meta in next stage and competitive. So we're going to talk about what his effect will be. He is obviously a new tool for the attackers, but he kind of, I don't know, I think he'll be good. I think, like, people talk about Ace, for example, right? And Ace was a really strong tool to come for the attackers, but he didn't fix the utility dump meta because he doesn't address the utility dump meta. He's a hard breacher. He's better than most of the other hard breachers, but he doesn't have flashbangs. He has smokes. And smokes don't clear ADSs as well as flashbangs. They don't clear magnets as well as flashbangs. They don't really help with the meta. So in a lot of cases, you'd love to run Ace, but he just doesn't deal with the problems the defense are presenting to you. I think Zero does address the utility dump meta, at least a little bit. I think his intel is really interesting, and there are going to be bomb sites where it helps a lot more than others. His one laser is not too impactful, but if you can destroy a Vulcan with it, if you can destroy like an ADS with it or a magnet, it's probably worth, like, that's probably pretty good. Particularly if you can get a Vulcan, or if you can get an ADS. Particularly with old ADSs, and we'll talk about that. It's probably pretty good for you. But I don't know if he'll be, he's not the answer, right? And there's sort of two different ways to address the utilities dump meta. You can give attackers more tools, or you can give defenders fewer. And, Zero is sort of the attempt to give attackers more tools. And that doesn't really work. Giving the attackers more still sort of plays into this meta. And it just makes attackers better at this meta. And the meta won't go away until they get so much better at the meta that the defense just tries something else, and something else works better than this utility dump. So I don't like that approach as much, but our next change that we're going to talk about is sort of the opposite direction, where you're taking stuff away from the defenders, and that's the Jaeger nerf. God bless, man, this looks so good. This is, I think, going to be the savior of this meta, is the Jaeger nerf. So just to reiterate, he has infinite charges now rather than 2 charges per ADS, but there's a 30-second cooldown between each charge. That's a huge amount of time, and it essentially means that he has, realistically, for a coordinated team, he's got half the amount of utility burn that he otherwise would have, right? Because instead of having to throw 2 flashbangs in, you throw 1 flashbang in, and then you've got a 30-second window, which is a pretty long time in Siege. We just came out of a 20-second meta, so that's the entire time that you actually need stuff disabled, plus 10 seconds, given our current meta. So it's fine, right? That recharge timer is long enough that it will rarely actually get to recharge. They're essentially ADSs that can block one thing now, and that's so much better. That means that even if you have no other teammates. If you're just like a sledge, you could burn an ADS with a frag grenade and then still kill somebody with your second frag grenade. Unless there's more than one ADSs, obviously. But that's like very little utility actually needed to clear out ADSs. And they're still stacking with Wamai magnets. Don't forget, it's not just Jaeger that was the problem. They're stacking with Wamai. They're stacking with Goyo. They're stacking with Malusi. They're stacking with Maestro. But it's a good start, and I was very happy that in the video they specifically talked about the meta, and they talked about how they're looking to make more changes as the season goes on. So I'm pretty hopeful. In terms of where the meta is going, I think certainly there's potential that we don't really see much change. There's potential that the Jaeger change is not enough. But I think that is going to be pretty significant, and we're going to see more and more teams on more and more bomb sites start to experiment with different things. And when those defensive teams start to experiment with different things, that allows way more opportunity for the attacking teams to start experimenting with different things. Because if there's not all that utility being brought from the defense, you can change up your operator lineup on attack. And that's the key thing here, right? The fact that they mentioned, wanting to make more changes leads me to believe that we'll be out of this meta soon. And in terms of where we're headed, I actually think the current signs point to a more Ying and Glaz focused meta. But let me explain myself a little bit here, because Ying is more or less back to where she was at. Glaz is more or less back to where he was at during the peak of these two operators. And I think that, there is reason to believe that we could see their resurgence. You could definitely argue, Ying got buffed a couple of months ago. Glaz got buffed a couple of weeks ago. Surely if we were going back to this meta, it would have already happened by now. And that's a good point. But again, the attackers have to react to the defenders. When the defense have all of this utility, you really can't justify bringing a Ying and a Glaz, because they don't deal with deployable shields. They don't deal with ADSs. They don't deal with magnets. They just can't address what the defenders are throwing at them, kind of like Ace. But if the defenders are forced to bring less of this because they don't have Jaeger and it's just not as effective for them, the attackers can experiment. And if they bring more, Ying and Glaz are good again, You now have Ace on the board as well. Ace has smokes, right? That's an extra tool that Glaz can take advantage of. You could even experiment with different lineups where your Glaz brings the frag grenades. And now you've got smokes from the Ace to cover him, so Glaz can still do his Glaz things. And now you free up another slot from the Sledge. Maybe the Sledge can play Buck instead. Or any other role that he wants to play. So I think there are some signs pointing to Ying Glaz being the new meta that comes in, replacing the utility dump meta that we're currently inside of. Again, that is a little bit scary. I think GetFlanked had a pretty good tweet, and I think it's a really well-informed tweet, and it highlights some worries that a lot of players might have with Ying Glaz coming back, because that wasn't a fun meta for a lot of players, because it does kind of suck if Candelas explode all over your face and you're standing in smoke and you just die to things that you doubly can't see. I mean, it does suck as defenders. That can be quite oppressive. But there are more tools that defenders have now that they didn't have back in the Ying Glaz meta. Warden is the big one, right? And we've already seen Warden experiment a little bit when Ying initially got buffed and teams started to experiment with her a little bit. Ultimately, it fell off. But even in just that little bit of experimenting with Ying, teams fell back to Warden, and Warden oftentimes was a pretty good counter to that Ying. Is it foolproof? Is it 100%? No, I mean, 4 of the players on your team then are still going to be heavily affected by this. But it's a start, right? And it's another tool that the defenders have. So in my mind, that's sort of where we're headed. That's sort of the direction that the game looks to be going. I think it's really encouraging. The defenders are talking about the meta. They're talking about where they want to see the meta go, and that is away from this 20-second utility dump style of play that we've been seeing really run rampant since, early 2020. Where we go after this, once this meta falls off, I think is still up for debate. Ying Glaz is a candidate, but it's not a guarantee of where things are going to end up. It could be something totally new and something that nobody's even really thought of. So I think the future of Siege is bright. I think it's very interesting. I'm going to be really excited watching forward, seeing how all of this breaks down. Obviously, this is something that really heavily interests me. So wherever it goes, as long as we're getting change, as long as the developers are trying to work on things, I'm excited. I'm here for the ride. And let me know what you think down below. If you think that the meta is headed towards more of that Ying Glaz, if you think we're going to be stuck in this utility dump meta for a long time still, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the Siege ecosystem and meta as a whole. You can go ahead and follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/JesseJChick. We do live streams every now and again, especially with majors going on right now. I like to just break down some of those games. I want to be doing a little bit more of that going forward. Because obviously we've got the NA major and then the APAC major coming up after that. You can also go ahead and follow me on twitter.com/JesseJChick, where I tweet about things that I don't know about. The election season is over, so I think we're going to go away from politics a little bit and head back in the Rainbow Six Siege tweets, which is really what everybody's looking forward to. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do subscribe, like, comment if you want to see more, and I'll see you on the next one.